the view that we find in the traditional sources here, this information that you're just talking about, how do we know who Jesus actually is? Give us indications of that from that information.
Well, as we've suggested, what we have within the witnesses that we have that are in the Bible, that are our best historical witnesses, these texts are important to us in this discussion, not so much because they're a part of the Bible, because they're our best historical witnesses, and history is about sources. And when you look at these earliest sources, they have these short traditional summaries, and they have hymns, which means that people were singing this stuff regularly, and usually when you sing stuff, you remember the words. All you need to do is hear the tune, and you're off and running. Or you have religious rites that you are undertaking on a regular basis, where you have liturgy that you're repeating or liturgy that you're hearing regularly. So, for example, with the Lord's Supper, you know, when you take the bread and you take the cup, you're hearing about the death of Jesus on a regular basis. Those are the types of things that we're thinking about. And most of the witnesses that we have for these little pieces of tradition are embedded in the Pauline epistles, which are our earliest witnesses that come from the 50s, and we know that it predates that. And as I've also suggested, is when you think about Paul's own experience about how he came to the Lord, he had to have a process by which he recognized who the risen Jesus was and what the theology was that was informing that when he had that experience in the 30s. So we know that some of this stuff goes back to the really to the very beginning points of Christianity.
Give us some of those little tidbits that we find in these writings that talk about Jesus.
I'll summarize a few of them for you. In Romans chapter 1, we have this section in verses 2 to 4 that connects Jesus at a human level to being the Son of David, but it connects him at a divine level as being demonstrated to be full of divine power as a result, or the Son of God as a result of the resurrection. That's one example. That's a traditional piece. Example of a hymn is in Colossians 1, where we get Jesus being the firstborn of the creation, who actually participates in and is responsible in the creation and for the creation. And then the second part of it has to do with him being head of the church. So it has a creator-redeemer theme built within it. It's all within 5 verses. It's laid out in an even structure in Greek so that you can tell this is something that's been laid out to be memorized. Third example, 1 Corinthians chapter 8, where Paul says, there may be many gods in the world, but for us, that is for Christians, there's one God the Father, and again it talks about the creation, and one Lord, Jesus Christ, and it talks about the creation again. So within the biblical material, that's only 2 verses long. Within the biblical materials, we have these short little bits of, if you will, teaching that are chock full of theology, that were passed on and were put in memorable bits so that people would know here are the core teachings of the faith.